Great to see you here. My name is Luc de Koster, and this is another lesson, another video, part of the CAPM II course offered by Europe Business University in cooperation with the Koster Academy. My name is Luc de Koster, founder of the Koster Academy, and in this video I will talk about ProjectLibre, how to allocate resources and resolve issues. But before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Let's have a look at the new project. We have a project that we want to integrate into ProjectLibre. And our project has six tasks from A to F. Task A, B, and C have no predecessors. And task A has a duration of 5 time periods, B 3 time periods, and C 2 time periods. D has a predecessor, activity A, and has a duration of 5 time periods. E has 2 predecessors, B and C, and takes 4 time periods. F is the last activity with predecessors D and E, and has 5 time periods, the duration of 5 time periods. Let's have a look how we built this network diagram and calculate early start, early finish, and the slack before we put this into ProjectLibre. We will start first with activity A with a duration of 5 periods. A doesn't have a predecessor, so we can start with A. The same for B with a duration of 3 periods, and for C with a duration of 2 periods. Now we can add D, and D has one predecessor, which is A, which we can show with the arrow between A and D. The next activity to add to the network is activity E, with a duration of 4 periods, and E has 2 predecessors, B and C. The last activity, F, is in fact added at the end. F has 2 predecessors, E and D. Now we can add a start point, a start milestone, because we have 3 hanging activities. We like to do that, you don't have to, so we start here with the start milestone like we will do in ProjectLibre. At the end, we can also add the finish milestone after all the activities that have no more successors, in this case only F. The next thing to do is to calculate the forward pass. I will go through it because you know how to do this, we've been doing this before. So activity A starts at period 1, 1 plus 5 minus 1 is 5. We do the same for activity B. B starts at 1, 1 plus 3 minus 1, so we have 1 as early finish and 3 as late finish. We do the same for C. We have the early start 1, and the early finish equal to 2. The next activity to consider is D. D has an early start which is equal to the early finish of A plus 1, which is equal to 6, and we can calculate the early finish of D. 6 plus 5 minus 1 is equal to 10. Now we have to look at the early start for activity E. Activity E has 2 predecessors, B and C, and we have to take the highest early finish, in this case the early finish of activity B, which is equal to 3. So the early start of activity E is 3 plus 1, and that is 4. The early finish for E is 4 plus 4 minus 1 is 7. And now we can find the early start of activity F, which is the maximum of the early finishes of D and E plus 1, in this case D. So we have 10 plus 1, and the early start of activity F is 11. 11 plus 5 minus 1 is 15. So the end date of the project is 15. So after 15 periods, the project is finished. Now we do the backward pass, and we start with the late finish of the project equal to 15. So in this case, early finish and late finish of activity F are the same, of the project are the same, and we can calculate backwards. Now we have 15 minus 5 plus 1 is 11. So the late start of activity F is 11. And based on this, we can calculate the late finish of D and E, which is equal to the late start of F minus 1, which is equal to 10 for both activities. Now, the next thing is the calculation of the late start of D, which is 10 minus 5 plus 1, which is equal to 6. And we can do the same for E, 10 minus 4 plus 1, which is equal to 7. Now we can calculate the late finish of activity A, which is equal to the late start of D minus 1, which is 5, and we calculate the late start of activity A, 5 minus 5 plus 1 is 1. We do the same for B, so B has a late finish which is equal to the late start of E minus 1, which is equal to 6, and we can calculate the late start of B, which is 6 minus 3 plus 1, and we have, of course, also 6 for C as the late finish. We have the late finish of C, or the late start of C is 5 minus 2 plus 1. And finally, we find the late start of B. I messed around a little bit in the order, but we can find the late start of B is 6 minus 3 plus 1, which is equal to 4. Now we can calculate the slack of all the activities, and we see that the slack for A is 0, for D is 0, and for F is equal to 0. The slack for B is 6 minus 3, it's 3. For E, it's also equal to 3. And for C, we have the slack, which is equal to 6 minus 2, is 4. And now we can find the critical path. The critical path is given by A, D, and F. And in this special case, we have, in fact, that the late start of the project, or the late finish of the project, is equal to the early finish of the project. And in that case, we know that the critical path is given by the activities with slack equal to 0. But remember, the critical path is given by the longest path, the duration of the longest path. So we have the paths ADF with the duration of 15, the path BEF with the duration of 12, and finally the path CEF with the duration of 11, and the longest path is ADF, and in this case, this is the critical path. Let's now put all these things together in ProjectLibre. Here we have the Gantt view of ProjectLibre, and the first thing what we have to do is to add the different activities. When you remember from the schedule, we saw that we had 3 hanging activities, A, B, and C. So here we start with the start milestone, which has a duration of 0. And you see that we start on the 6th of December. Now we have activity A. Activity A takes 5 days. So we see immediately that it starts on the 6th and ends on that Friday. We have activity B with a duration of 3 days. We have activity C with a duration of 2 days. D with a duration of 5 days. E with a duration of 4 days. And F, the last activity, with a duration again of 5 days, which gives us the total of all the activities. We have also a finish milestone, which again has a duration of 0 days. Now we have to link those activities, so we have to see, first of all, we have to link the start milestone with activities A, B, and C. We know that D is after A, so we link the activity here, and you see the number of the predecessors. So 1, 2, 3 are the numbers here. It doesn't show you the names. Then we have E is after B and C, so we have E here and here. And finally, we have the last activity, F after D and E. We have E here, and of course we link this to the final or the finish milestone. So this is the network that we are talking about. That's what we are putting together. And now we have to identify the critical path. So we have A, D, and F. And we see that we have slack here. We have those B, C, and E have slack. The next thing to do is to go and add the resources. So we go to the resource menu. We click to the resources. And the first resource I call Harry Potter. I have to correct it. Harry Potter. We have a type here. We have work. We have initials HP. We can put an email address, the maximum units that Harry can work. So basically 100% of a day. That's the maximum that we can give. We give him a standard rate of 1,000 crowns per hour. That's typical here, I think, for a project manager, or it depends, 2,000. Cost per use is every time we have, for example, somebody who has to be trained. It could be in the case, but we don't have it here. Accrued add, we can do it prorated over the time, start or end. And these are the main elements that I want to add here. So the base calendar, we can also check or find a different calendar. We can create a calendar typically for Harry. Also for the rate, we can put a special table for the rate when we want to increase the wages at a certain time during the work that Harry is performing. We put another name, Luc de Custer. I will be project manager or working on the project also. I also look at work. My initials are LDC. I also work with the, let's say, since I'm teaching here, I make it 1,500. And my overtime is 3,000. And I have a starting fee of 1,000. I also use the standard calendar. Now I look at material A. I add material A. In this case, I have a material, mat A, I will call it mat A. I put it at the standard rate. You say it's a fixed rate, it's 20,000 that I need. Cost per use is also 5,000. We add it here and we do it prorated. We put it at the end, at the start, for example. And then I have equipment that I will be using, equipment E. I call it also a material, equipment EQE. I have here 5,000. We have no cost per use, and I say that it's prorated. There is no calendar linked to it. So basically here we have the information about the different people. I can have a look in detail to Harry Potter. I see Harry Potter here, email address. I can add all the elements here. I can change the calendars. I can define a special calendar for Harry Potter. We have the costs here. I see, for example, effective date 1st of January 1970. From that time is making that, let's say, that rate. We have different rates we can use for different circumstances. I can put here for the 12th, let's say from the 12th, the 15th of 12th, I will have, I give Harry a raise. It will be at 1,500 crowns per hour, and the prorated rate then would be 3,000 for the overtime rate. So close, we will see that it will change the rate. Resource availability, we can also change the resource availability. We can say that, for example, on 15, on the 12th, on the 10th, it will only be available for 50%. And on the 12th, the 11th, it will be again available for 100%. Here we see the tasks that we allocate Harry to, but we don't know it yet, so we have to see what's going to happen here. So let's have a look here, close, and let's have a look back at the tasks. We go back to the Gantt chart, and now we have to link Harry Potter to these different activities. We link Harry Potter to activity B. So we go to activity B. I look at the resources. So now I add the resource Harry Potter, and we add Harry there for 75%. And that's it. So I have assigned Harry Potter for 75%. We go to activity C. Here I add resources. I look at the resource Harry Potter again to this, but now we only add him for 50%. And that's basically it. So basically what we see here is that we have allocated Harry Potter to activity B and C. We already can estimate that will be a problem here because we have an overlap of 2 days where Harry is working, in fact, more than 100%. Now what we see here is the overview per week for Harry Potter. Now we look at Harry Potter. We can also select Luc de Custer, but I'm not allocated to anything yet. So what I see here, Harry is over allocated. We get here the 100% of utilization of Harry Potter, and we have the different elements here that we have. So what we have to look at the project, the selected one, we have selected Harry Potter. We have activity B, what we see here, and we have activity C. So we can see what those activities do. We have A and B and C. So we have this project. We look at Harry Potter for all of them, and we can now find a way to deal with Harry Potter. Now, one of the things we could say, we add some people to activity B. And I add, for example, Luc de Custer, I add myself for 25% of the time. And now have a look at the duration of B. What we see is that B becomes shorter because I put a second resource to this activity. Now, this can be sometimes a little bit of a problem if we're adding more and more people to a project. We have to be sure, I will go back here, that when we do that, we have to set before the advanced settings for fixed duration. If we put a fixed duration here, adding Luc de Custer will not change anything. But what we're going to do is looking at fixed work. So we look at fixed work, and when we add something or when we change something, we will see that the duration of the activity will change when we change the commitment of Harry Potter. For example, I go to B, I go to resources, I go to Harry, and what I do now is I say, oh, sorry, I should not do that. I have to change the duration here. So I change the duration to 4 days. I increase the duration for Harry Potter. And what do I see is that, let's say, when I look at all the activities, I see now that Harry Potter is only working for 56% during the first 3 days. That's in fact activity B. So we have activity B, we're working at 56%, but we're having here 50%, so we still have a problem here. I can try to change C, but first I have to see that we have fixed work. Okay, so we have fixed work. Now we increase this to 3 days. So basically what we see now for Harry Potter is that we are within the desired range. Now, when we changed, for example, the duration of B, we also changed the starting time of activity E. So basically, we solved the problem here. We looked at the different elements, and basically this is the way how to deal with the problems with the resources. In the previous part, what we did was changing, in fact, the duration to decrease the commitment of Harry Potter. Another thing what we can do, and it's a little bit delicate when we drag it here, we can see that we move the activity, but we have to be careful that we move it to the next day, that we take into account the times. For example, we have 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. So Harry Potter is still at 75%. But since we moved it, we have a different element here. We see that the commitment is basically better. We can also move this activity because we can make it one day later. It means that now we have some overlap here because we have 2 days and 3 days, it's 5 days. So basically I can only leave it at the beginning, otherwise it would be a problem. So we have to start at 8 a.m. So 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. That's basically the duration. The scales are not so good here, so it can be a little bit tricky. But if we look at the start times and the things like this here, we can really see what's happening. We see here that we start at the same time. We have adjusted the elements here. What we also can do is to extend this. For example, over here, we can make it a few days later. We make it 5 days. So, but when we do it here, it doesn't show the percentage. So when I make it to 5 days, so C to 5 days, I have to adjust it here. And then I see that the percentage is changed. And we see that we are still within the duration. We can also move it to a later date. We can also say this is 3 days also. And we can let it finish at the same time as on Friday here. So when we see that it finishes on the 10th or the 9th, we can move it here. So basically, but what happens here when we do it like this, we still have a little bit of a problem here. So basically, it's not really the way to deal with it, but there are different possibilities. We can let this start a little bit earlier, let's say the 7th instead of the 6th. And we see that we still have the 3 days, but we go to 4 days again. So 4 days. And we see that we have a solution here. So we have a different adjustment that we made. Very important to see is what happened here is that the activity E moved to the next Monday, and it's completely, let's say, in parallel with the critical path activity that we have here. Now let's have a look at activity D. We didn't have a resource added. We have activity D where we can put the Harry Potter for 50%. We assign Harry Potter for 50%. And for activity, and we also have to go to the advanced, we look at fixed work, otherwise it will change when we change the duration. And now we have E, activity E. We look at the resources. We didn't have any resources, so we have Harry Potter. We put Harry Potter there for 60%. We assign it. And we see that when we look down here now, when we look at Harry Potter, we see a problem here. Oh, we have a problem here because I didn't change the setting. So I put fixed work here. So basically what we see here, we have Harry Potter 50%, but here we have the 10% that we have too much. Basically, this is a problem because we're using Harry Potter more than 100%. And when I look at the 5 days, when I make it on 5 days, I see everything is okay now. So we have Harry Potter for 50% on activity D and Harry Potter for 48% on activity E. No Harry Potter on activity F. And what we see is that we don't have a problem here to assign the resource, and we can, in fact, what we use. Now let's change it a little bit. Let's make it a little bit more complicated. Let's go to Harry Potter on E, and we're going to say Harry Potter is there now 80%. So what happens here is that we now have 80%, and we had 4 days. Back to the 4 days. What do we have? 60%? Now we have to have 80% resources. 60% we had. We go to 80%. Yes, I changed that. Assign. We have this. Close. But we have E. Still 4 days. It changes automatically. Shouldn't be. So we have a small problem here. So let's have a look at E, how it is advanced, fixed work. Let's delete the resources, remove Harry Potter. Okay, so now we have the 4 days. We look at fixed work and we look at the resources. I add Harry Potter again. So now we have 80%. So when I change the resource later, it also changes the duration, so we have to be careful. So now I have Harry Potter 80% here, and we see that we have, in fact, an issue. What we can do is we can make this 5 days. We see that we have the same critical path, but we didn't find the solution yet. Now, the thing what we can do is that we have to find a way to solve the problem. We cannot move these two anyway. It will change the critical path. We have multiple critical paths now, which is not so nice. But what we can do, let's say this is the activity with the highest percentage. Let's move it to 6 days. And we see now that we have still a small problem here. We have still a small problem here. So basically what I have to do is move it to 7 days, and then we will not have a problem anymore, I hope. So we see that now we have a solution, but we also see that the critical path changed. And that's what we call resources leveling. So in this case, Harry Potter will be working on this activity. This is the activity which is on the critical path. So basically what I can do here is move this activity to an earlier time, which could give us some advantage here. So we have Harry Potter here be starting. Let's say that let's start this at the 6th again. So we have now the two critical paths, but what I see, by moving this activity, we have those two critical paths, but the nice thing is that we finish 1 day earlier. So these are the things that you can do when you're working on the schedule. Now, you will say this is a very easy project, it's a very simple project. You are 1000% right. This is a very simple project. When you have a very complex project with a lot of resources, this can be very difficult. I will not use the term that most project managers will be using, but it's a pain, and you know what I mean. So basically, looking at the simple project here, looking at the different people, we see how these things are working. We see how the project is working. I also allocated a resource for, let's say, myself. So let's have a look what we can do here. When we have a resource, we've also take it here as fixed work. We look at the resource. Now we put Luc de Custer here for 80%. So we assign Luc de Custer here, so that's also nice. And we can also go to the last activity, F. We look at advanced, we look also at fixed work, the resources. We also had look the cluster here for 100%, why not, assign, and that's basically it. So what we're looking at here is we can have a look at the resource, look the cluster. We can look the cluster here, where we have green. The blue means that is the selected activity that we have. We selected F. We look at Harry Potter. So that was it for this example. We will be using this example later when we are going to look at the critical path position of the project.